Hello everybody. Welcome to all grade 11 learners and grade 11 educators. My name is Linda Hackner. I'm Director of Education at the Cape Town Holocaust and Genocide Centre. And together with all my colleagues at the centre, we welcome you to Unit 4, Case Study Australia, which is part of a series of units we've done which help clarify the section in your curriculum on theories of race in the 19th and 20th century and how this affected governments. For those of you who have not seen the other units have dealt with firstly an overview, and then we looked at social Darwinism and race theory, and very importantly, eugenics. So now we're looking at how eugenics are used in Australia. So grade 11, in the 19th century, the early colonizers of Australia physically forced the indigenous Aboriginal people off their land. Indigenous, the people who were there originally, the original people, Aboriginal people. And they were forced off their land, sometimes in very cruel and heartless ways. The colonizers stole Aboriginal children and used them as slave labor. And they did these things with violence. They put people into sort of compounds which led to diseases from people being displaced off their land. So many Aboriginals died and their numbers dwindled, got very small very rapidly. Of course, the social Darwinists said, well, here you go. This is an example of what we call the natural process of survival of the fittest. Those who are able to survive do, and those who are weak just die off. So it was, they justified this via social Darwinism. Now, the policy of removing Indigenous children from their families and their communities was because of the influence of race theory, social Darwinism, and of course eugenics, which I spoke at length about in the last unit. Those people who put these practices in place in Australia believed that non-Indigenous Australians, in other words, those that came from England, Ireland, Wales, and other countries in Northern Europe, had a superior civilization and a superior heritage, and that the Aboriginal people were inferior and that their culture was inferior, and therefore, taking things to their logical conclusion in terms of the pseudosciences, false sciences of race theory, social Darwinism, and eugenics, these people had the right to dominate the Aboriginal people. One of the big things about Australia was that Australia wanted to keep Australia white. They wanted a white Australia. So how were they going to do this? Well, they came up with two policies. The first policy was a whites-only immigration policy. You could come and live in Australia as long as you were white. And this policy remained in place for many, many years, up until 1973. Only white people could go and live in Australia. That was the one arm of their brand of eugenics. What was the other arm? Well, the other arm, grade 11, was that they wanted to absorb Black people into the white population through breeding out Blackness. So the idea is, if you breed Black people with white people, eventually Black people will turn white. And let's have a look at how they saw this happening. Because, okay, let's just look at this. Grade 11, this is a piece of writing from a policy recommendation from James Isdell, who was the chief protector of Aborigines. So already you've got white people feeling that they are in charge of the Aboriginals, they protect the Aboriginals, and they tell Aboriginals what to do. This was a policy put to Parliament in 1909, and this is what he says. He says, the half caste. Now, what does that mean in terms of Australia at this time? That means someone who has one Aboriginal parent and one white parent. The half caste is intellectually above the Aborigine, and it is the duty of the state that they be given a chance to lead a better life than their mothers. I would not hesitate for one moment to separate any half caste from its Aboriginal mother, no matter how frantic their momentary grief might be at this time. They soon forget their offspring. Now, grade 11, this is a primary source. These are words that were written by the chief protector of the Aboriginals, and it shows us very clearly the attitude towards Aboriginal people. Firstly, because someone is half white, they immediately, according to these people, are intellectually above a full Aboriginal. Secondly, the Aboriginal mother, says James Isdell, won't feel the grief because Aboriginals will forget their offspring. So he's talking about Aboriginal people as though he would be talking about a cat who's had kittens, and you take one away and the cat will forget about it. So there's this idea that Aboriginal people are not really human like white people, and that if you breed out the Aboriginal, eventually everyone will be white. And let's see how this is put into practice. Now, this is quite complex, grade 11, so I'm going to explain it as simply as I can, because these ideas, these pseudoscientific ideas, are so, frankly, crazy that it becomes difficult to explain them because they make so little sense. So what we've got here is this. The lady who is wearing the flowered shirt and the jacket, okay? We're going to call mother number one, okay? Her parents are an Aboriginal mother and an Irish Australian father. So in other words, an Aboriginal mum, a white dad, which makes her what the Australians would have called a half caste, okay? She has a child, and she has a child with a Scottish Australian. So the half caste number one mum has a baby with a white Australian and gives birth to number two. So now her parents are one white and one so-called half caste. So she's a quarter Aboriginal. She's known as a quadroon. Mum number two, has a child with a father of Australian Irish descent, a white father. And she has this little boy who you see, whose mother is number two. And so his parents are less Aboriginal because she's now only a quarter Aboriginal, the mother, and he is called an octoroon. He's only an eighth Aboriginal. So the Australians believed that if you carried on, if that little boy eventually has a child with a white person, in the end, there will be no blackness. Their blood will be white and their skin will be white. They were more interested in skin color, not necessarily blood, so to speak. So it's complicated, but this was the Australian brand of eugenics, to breed blackness out. Now, the key issue was skin color, The key issue was breeding blackness out by the predominance of so-called white blood. If you have followed my previous units, grade 11s, you will know that we have spoken about the fact that there is no white blood, no black blood, no Christian blood, no South African blood, no Muslim blood, no Australian blood, no Jewish blood. There is simply red blood in all of us that we can share, and we do. The whites-only immigration policy only came to an end in 1973, so it went on for over 70 years, essentially. Now, very important, grade 11s. There is a very crucial difference between how Australia used eugenics and how Germany used eugenics. And the case study in Nazi Germany is really important for South African learners to learn, because we have a direct connection to this, which I'll explain to you in the next unit. But in Germany, you had to have pure German blood. Anything else, you were not considered German. Now, I've just said to you, there's no such thing as German blood, Australian blood, South African blood, but the Nazi Germans believed absolutely in purity of blood. And if you were not pure German, according to their ideas, then you were considered to have contaminated blood, and you could not be allowed to infect the pure German blood. But more of this grade 11 in the next unit, when we will deal with case study Nazi Germany. And I want to thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again in unit 5. Bye-bye.